Hello and welcome to the video series I tend to do after I release like a big video essay or a review or whatever, where I basically just go through and I reply to common comments and, correct whatever mistakes I might have made during the production of the video, because, these tend to be very big projects for me, and I'm also only human, so, I am going to make mistakes, either in not researching things well enough or just misspeaking because, maybe I remembered something wrong or whatever. These tend to be a little more like a podcast than like a proper video series, though. Like, if something does warrant it, I will throw it up on screen, but don't expect any like kind of complex or fancy editing like I normally do in my videos. This is just basically me talking for however long this is going to be, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I tend to ramble sometimes, especially when I'm not working off of a script, which, I have notes, but I do not have a script. This is just me being totally conversational and completely off the cuff. This is for my Sonic Frontiers video review, though, I hesitate to call it a video review. I find that if I title videos as a video review, they tend to get less views than an essay, so you might actually notice that in the course of this Sonic Frontiers video, I did not use the term review in the title. I called it a criticism of Sonic Frontiers in the hopes that, whatever drives people away from reading or watching review videos or whatever, that wouldn't happen here. I'd still get decent viewership, let's say. First question, I guess, at the very top of my notes here, I had a lot of people ask me, why did I choose to do the video now? Because Sonic Frontiers has had 2 major updates since it launched, and it is about to have its 3rd and final major update at the end of the month, on, I think, I might be wrong here, but I think they said September 29th is the date of the last DLC pack called The Final Horizon, which looks like it might completely replace the end of the game with a brand new ending sequence. But there's a very obvious reason I chose to do this video now, and it's the fact that I actually didn't choose to do the video right now. I suppose, to make this make sense to both me and to you, we need to back way, way, way up, almost a year ago. For those of you out there who don't know how YouTube works for people who make money on the platform, Christmas time is a big deal for YouTubers. And by Christmas time, what I mean is probably from around the end of September or maybe the middle of October all the way up until, we'll say, the 1st or 2nd week of December. That is basically considered primo YouTube prime time. It is like sweeps week, but it lasts for 2 or 3 months. And that's because that is when advertisers on the platform really, really ramp up advertising their products for people to buy, right? It is, it's Black Friday, it's all that stuff. It's the holiday buying season. And what that means for YouTubers is that if we put videos out during this period, our earnings go way, 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 way up. So, that period of time hit last year. This was probably around September 2022. A sponsor had just contacted me about sponsoring one of my videos. You may, if you've seen the video, you know that it's SNHU, Southern New Hampshire University. I'd turned sponsor deals down in the past, but obviously my living situation is very different. I would like to live more comfortably. All my gear is getting to be very out of date. I need upgrades. I need all kinds of things now that my life is where it is currently. So I said, yeah, sure. I'll do a sponsor deal, an ad read. But I wanted it to be a very special video because I think at this point I was just wrapping up on either the Sonic Origins video review or the very first Sonic Origins video I did, why Sonic Origins matters, right? It was the tail end of production on one of those two videos. I think it was the video review. And I said, okay, sure, I'll do this sponsor read for you, but I've got a very special video that I want to put it into because I wanted to maximize the number of eyeballs that would, see this video. And that ended up being the Sonic Adventure 2 video. I told them, I was going to be starting the video from scratch. It would take me a couple months to put together, I figured, and it would drop somewhere between the end of October to the middle of November. I was kind of aiming right for that Black Friday week. And as you may know, I missed that Black Friday week by 2 months. Because that video took me a lot longer to put together than I was expecting. And when it came to that video, I was rushing to get that video done. I was crunching so hard. I know crunch culture is bad, but I'm my own boss. I can only blame myself for my unhealthy work habits. And, I acknowledge it wasn't very good for me, but money was on the line and I gotta survive. We all gotta survive, right? I am trying to make this my job. I'm trying to elevate my status, as it were. And what that meant is that, during production of the Sonic Adventure 2 video, Sonic Frontiers came out. And, I streamed half the game on my Twitch channel. And then, I figured, okay, I've streamed it enough. I really need to buckle down and get this video done. I partially blamed Sonic Frontiers for the reason why I missed Black Friday. So, I basically shut myself out from the world and I knuckled down and I worked and I worked and I worked. I worked through Thanksgiving, I worked through Christmas, I worked through New Year's. And by that I mean I worked on Thanksgiving Day, I worked on Christmas Day, I worked on New Year's Day, right? I had no holidays. And I said this at the end of the Sonic Adventure 2 video, I said, I need a vacation. But then, Sega announced Sonic Origins Plus, and I figured, okay, well, I gotta do a quick video on that because, I'm building momentum on this Sonic Origins opinion thing, and, I gotta keep it up. And that came out around March, and I said, okay, now the holiday begins, right? Now is when I take a month, maybe even 2 months off. And, during that downtime, I did all kinds of stuff that I'd been sitting on for a really, really long time. I finished Sonic Frontiers, for example. I streamed the last 2 islands on my Twitch channel. If you haven't seen it, there's a stream VOD on my Game Dump channel. It's 5 parts. I play through the entire game. If you had an issue with my Sonic Frontiers opinions, you can see me lay them all out over the course of 20 or 30 hours. We'll say I make it through the rest of March, we get to April. Sonic Frontiers is still kind of rattling around in my brain, and something I learned with Sonic Origins is that when I do we'll say a preview video, right? That's a gut check video, or with Sonic Origins, it was why Sonic Origins matters, right? Where I'm talking up all the people working on the game, and then I figure, since I hyped it up pre-release, I have to follow through and do a second video to see whether or not it confirms or denies what I was thinking. And I'm gonna stop myself right here and do a little bit of a sidebar. I feel like every time I say Sonic Origins, there's a part of my brain that thinks Sonic Superstars. So I feel like at some point, if I haven't already, I'm going to say one game instead of the other. I'm going to get them mixed up. Anyway, because I did the gut check video on Sonic Frontiers where I said, I didn't think Sonic being a melee fighter looked very good, so on and so forth, I figured I needed to do a follow-up video review, a proper video review. So April 2023, I started writing a script. And it was somewhere around maybe May that I realized what I had written on the script I didn't like. The script was kind of growing out of control, and it was kind of getting to be hard for me to look at it, in a sense. If you didn't know, I probably have undiagnosed ADHD. I know, like, that's like a crutch a lot of people lean on nowadays. A lot of people say, "Oh, I have ADHD," and like, it's just an excuse they have for themselves for why they act the way they act. For me, it's a little more literal because all throughout school, I had a bunch of teachers that were kind of begging my mom to get me officially diagnosed because they're teachers. They interact with hundreds of kids over the course of a year. They see kids with ADHD all the time. They're almost as qualified as a doctor when it comes to diagnosing who does and does not have ADHD. And, these teachers are trying to tell my mom, "Oh, he has ADHD, you should get him checked out. You should maybe, think about getting him medicated." And she completely refused because, this was back in like 1992, 1993, when we knew less about ADHD. It wasn't even called ADHD at that point. It was just ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. And by my mom's own personal research, again, this is pre-internet, this is before a lot of different things, she didn't think I had it because I didn't have quite as many symptoms as some of my teachers said I do. Because, back then, ADD kids were super hyperactive, they were super impulsive, difficult to control, and I was kind of the polar opposite of that. I was the kind of kid I would sit very patiently, very quietly, not bother anyone, just kind of keep to myself all the time. But now that I'm an adult, many, many years later, 2023, you figure 1993 to 2023, that is a good 30 years later, I think I know better about myself and about my habits and about my difficulty concentrating sometimes and staying on topic and stuff like that. So when it comes to writing a script, there comes a point where it gets to be so big that it feels like I can't really pay attention to it anymore. Like I'm going on too many tangents, like I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. So when a script gets really, really big like that, I like to break it down into sections. And obviously, the final video that we have right now is broken down into sections, about the story, about the puzzles, about the open world, the combat system, cyberspace, and so on. So that basically meant throwing out the old script that was written, more as like a singular complete thought, and then breaking a brand new script down into all these little subsections so that, at least for me, it was more easy for me to concentrate on different ideas. And that was, like I said, that was maybe May, early June. And normally scripts aren't supposed to take that long to write. But I'd learned my lesson with the Sonic Adventure 2 video and me becoming, for lack of a better term, or even just, even for the definition of what it is, I was very burnt out. I didn't want to do anything. If I never made a video again, it would have been too soon. That's kind of how I felt in February. So when I started production on this video in April and restarted it again in May, the idea was that I would take my time. I would go slowly. And, all the way back in May, I think, or April or May, they hadn't even announced the DLC yet. Maybe they had, maybe they'd put out that image that I show in the video of the 3 different updates. They basically just only really announced the birthday update by that point. And I figured, okay, well, the final DLC update, that's probably going to be coming, October, November, maybe even December. I got time. My video will be out way, 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 way before that comes out. And, I started capturing video, I did voiceover, and you can hear me say in the voiceover that I expect the final DLC to come by the end of the year. Because even then, even when I recorded that voiceover in the middle of July or, even late August in some cases, we still didn't have a date on any of that yet. And when you think about it, the announcement of the final DLC didn't come until a week and a half before that video came out. And by that point, I had captured, 600 gigabytes of video. I had 3 hours of voiceover that I had to cut down to 1 hour. I had done all this work on a video that, it was kind of too big to stop at this point. And on top of that, SNHU came knocking all the way back September of last year, looking for, a video from me. In the middle of July, SNHU came back again, and they were like, hey, do you want to do another ad read for us? And I was like, yeah, dude, let's get it on, because by this point, I was like a quarter or even halfway through the Sonic Frontiers video review at this point. I had captured most of my video. I was starting to cut everything together. The video was starting to come together, and I figured, okay, this time I'm not going to make them wait 4.5 months for a video. We're going to turn this around. I'm going to have it done by August, right? So right then and there, I have a commitment, basically. I have to say, okay, video has to be out by August 31st, no matter what. So, we get down to August 20th, August 21st, when they dropped the date for the final DLC. Well, there's nothing I could do about it then. The video has to be out by August 31st. And this, that's just the way it had to be. I had to get the video out then, no matter what. Come hell or high water, that video had to be out by or before August 31st. That's just the way it is. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't actually think the Final Horizons DLC will even fix the game unless it significantly overhauls the open zones with new art assets, or changes how the combat system works, or rebalances the entire game, right? I don't think they're going to do that. I think it'll probably be very interesting. There have been leaks about what's going to be in that DLC, and it does look pretty wild, but I don't think it's going to significantly revamp the problems I had with Sonic Frontiers. Just straight up. The DLC will make it a better game, I'm sure. That I have no doubt of. And depending on how much it actually changes the final product, maybe by October, I'll have a second, shorter, faster, quicker video to talk about the DLC. We'll see. I'm not ruling that out. In fact, I'm kind of counting on it. Even if I don't really have anything super valuable to say about the final DLC. But the real reason I wanted to do this, comment response video or whatever, is the fact that a lot of people had kind of a visceral reaction to the way I opened that Sonic Frontiers video, because I kind of went into a direction that people thought I was using to insult them with. And I figured I should at least address and maybe provide better context on why I said what I said. Think back, I was starting this video all the way back in April. The whole Game Awards thing was kind of fresher in my mind back then, right? And I have friends that are in and around the fringes of the game industry. I know some developers, I know some people in the press, so on and so forth. And one of those people is a guy named Imran Khan. Maybe you know his work. He's, written for Fanbyte. He wrote for Game Informer. He's guested on some Giant Bomb videos every now and then. He's a name in the industry. But before he blew up, he was just, a guy I played Left 4 Dead with every weekend. Or, I guess technically we were playing Left 4 Dead every day, right? I have 900 hours in that game, and I would say more than half of it was games I played with Imran, and there was a bunch of other people that played with us, but I'm just trying to establish I know this guy. I even guested on some of his smaller podcasts way back in the day, and obviously the big one is that Imran and I did a big charity marathon where we played Sonic 06 for 18 hours straight. That whole stream VOD is on my main channel if you go looking for it. And, around the time that the Sonic community was really asking people to get out and go vote for Sonic Frontiers in this Game Awards poll or whatever, Imran, being someone who is, a professional paid critic who, it's his job to give opinions every day, tweeted out that in observing the Genshin Impact versus Sonic Frontiers poll debate, he kind of felt that Sonic Frontiers was kind of just okay. He didn't even really think it was from what I remember, it's hard to find it now because he's deleted the tweet, and it's going to be very obvious why here in a second. But from my memory, he wasn't even that mean about it. He was just being honest. He was saying Sonic Frontiers was merely, just okay. And that he didn't really understand why Sonic fans were, pushing so hard to win the vote. Because in his mind, the game was, I guess, mediocre, you could say. But, he got what I would consider to be a pretty outsized reaction to that. Sonic fans kind of flooded his replies with anger and vitriol and swearing and calling him names and, you'd think, okay, basic internet commenter stuff. Imran himself, I believe, tweeted out that, he doesn't care if people are mad at him, and, if you're a paid critic like that, you kind of can't be, because, again, it's your job, and people get heated for dumb and weird reasons. But what really, stepped over the line was somebody sent him a DM where they had actually, cut up their wrists and said, to Imran, this is your fault. I'm bullied all day for liking Sonic games. I can never enjoy anything good, and it's because of guys like you that constantly trash the series. And again, I want to point out, I didn't think Imran was even being that mean about Sonic Frontiers. He was not being a troll. He was just saying he thought the game was a little mediocre. And here is someone sending him shock images, basically, telling him he's a monster, essentially, for saying the game is mediocre. And it's hard to put into words how... I'm trying really hard not to say the word crazy, but it's crazy. That people would have such an intense reaction to something like that. It was out of control. And in that context, I want you to think back to the video I made and some of the last words I said in that intro segment, where I said, food always tastes better when you're hungry, and some of you are very clearly starving. That Game Awards poll turned some people into ravenous animals, and not in a good way. This incident in particular was what I was primarily thinking about when I wrote that intro segment. About the absolute depths that some people crawl out of because of a simple disagreement in opinion. And if hearing that opening segment made you angry, I have some very good news. It's not about you. If you're over there thinking, he's being mean to Sonic fans and I'm not one of those people, then congratulations. I'm not talking about you. Maybe this comparison won't play very well, but what it makes me think of is how during the whole men's rights activism fad 5 or 10 years ago, the phrase "not all men" became something that was thrown around, sometimes as a joke, right? Because when women were talking about dangerous or toxic men, well, if you're not a dangerous or toxic man, then they weren't talking about you, right? And yet some dudes would still wade into arguments about how not all men were like that, selfishly making the topic about themselves instead of the much bigger and very real problem being described. So if you're over there not all Sonic fans are like that, then great, they aren't. But we have a record of something that did actually happen, even if it did not personally involve you. I understand that Sonic fans are still a little touchy after how many people have been so nasty to them over the last 15 years, but it's not 2008 anymore. This isn't a podcast like The Brodeo on OneUp.com. I'm not Sean Elliott dragging Sonic fans every single week. You are talking to a guy that identifies online as Blaze Hedgehog. I've been playing these games since 1991. I had a green Hedgehog OC when I was a teenager. I am one of you. This is not persecution. Settle down and relax. Believe it or not, you are among friends here. Heck, I even think I voted for Sonic Frontiers in that dumb Game Awards poll. But again, something did happen. Even if you weren't involved, even if I'm not talking about you, it did actually happen though. Sonic Frontiers was leading the poll, cheating was detected and removed, and Sonic Frontiers lost. Plain and simple. Now, later on in the video, when I'm talking about the battle system, and I specifically show quotes from people who left comments on my previous Sonic Frontiers video, yes, I am being too mean there. And I realized I was being too mean as I was taking the final screenshot of the final comment. Disagreeing on an opinion is one thing, but focusing hatred and negativity towards specific individual people is not cool. That's why I ended up cropping out the avatars and blurring the names at the very least. Because I didn't want to direct anything towards those people that they honestly didn't deserve. I would have completely written that segment out of the video review, but I was editing that part of the video in the last 24 to 48 hours of production, and the deadline I had to get it done by August 31st said that, I didn't have any time to figure out a more tactful way to handle that segment. Otherwise I would have, straight up. Another small thing that could probably go in the corrections section coming up here in a minute, but some people like to note that story NPCs have a dedicated quest marker to point out where they are on the map. Even if you don't have the full map revealed, you always know where the next story NPC is because the game always points you directly at them. And that's true. That's something the game actually does. But there are actually way more story NPCs on each island than just the ones that are required to finish the story. And these optional story NPCs still give you story. They still give you flavor and background of the island and what's happening with these characters and things like that. They're just optional, and the only way for you to find them is to reveal the map and mark them. Otherwise, they're usually hidden in some really obscure place where they're never going to be found otherwise. And you can even see this in the video itself. Towards the end of that story segment, where I'm talking about this, about how hard it is to find certain story NPCs, there's a clip I use where it's telling me to find and talk to Amy Rose. And her quest marker is way off in the distance. It's not even on screen anymore. But I'm approaching a much closer Amy Rose that isn't marked to talk to, but I can still talk to her anyway. And that's just what I'm demonstrating there, is saying, hey, there's more than just the quest marker NPCs. There's a lot more characters you can talk to on the map, and they are almost impossible to find without revealing the whole map first. And finally in this segment, a lot of people have asked me how I feel about the pinball in Sonic Adventure, because that's not something I brought up in my complaint about terrible pinball sections in 3D Sonic games. And, it's not so bad, but it's also something that they let you skip if you don't want to do it. And I would say more often than not, I don't want to do it. Sometimes I do it. Sometimes, the pinball in Sonic Adventure is fine. It's certainly a lot more functional and a lot more enjoyable than it is in Sonic Frontiers. And sometimes I do play it normally. I tend to prefer Knight's Pinball because it's more fun, it's more creative. It's always nice to see Nights into Dreams in Sonic Team games. But more often than not, if you take a loss on purpose and lose all 3 balls, it dumps you into a garbage chute that is just full of rings anyway, and that's usually the way I go, if I have to. And I think even the speedruns almost always pick the garbage chute route because it's faster. And now for the second half of this video or podcast or whatever you want to call it, where I talk about corrections, things I got wrong, things that need to be clarified better, that don't fit in the first half of this podcast. But whatever, you'll figure it out. It's fine. We'll figure it out together. First mistake I made was that there were actually more Sonic game delays than I thought. There was 2 actually, one that I remember and one that I don't. The first delay was Sonic Mania, which I honestly have no memory of. I think it was probably like a pretty short delay, if I had to guess. Actually, I didn't write this in my notes. We'll just do this live. Yeah, it was delayed by all of a week. That is not for game development reasons. That's something else. That's business date stuff. Like that's nothing. I'd hardly even count that as a delay. But the second one that I do remember is Team Sonic Racing, which was like a pretty significant delay from what I remember. It was like 6 months, 9 months, maybe even like up to a year. It was a long delay. And that's because everything I've heard about that game, like behind the scenes, made it sound like it was pretty troubled. This isn't like a Team Sonic Racing video, so I'm not going to go into the rumors and the stuff that I've heard about how that game was developed, but I'm pretty sure like this specific delay was to completely rebalance the game's loot box system after there was that big debacle with Star Wars Battlefront 2, where, you know, a lot of people were like starting to talk about like legal action about, you know, stopping loot boxes in big AAA games because, you know, like from what I remember hearing, like with Battlefront 2, the only way you could play as like Darth Vader was to get him in a random pull in a loot box, or something like that. I don't know. It was a long time ago, and I didn't really pay attention to Battlefront 2 at all. But there was, it caused a big stink, and a lot of developers, a lot of publishers kind of like, you know, abandoned the loot box idea after that. That was around the time like Fortnite stopped having loot boxes. That was around the time Overwatch like started moving in the direction of not having loot boxes anymore. I mean, obviously, you know, it took until Overwatch 2 for that to happen, but that whole Battlefront 2 scenario scared a lot of people away. So, and you know, you play Team Sonic Racing, the final game, and that game has a loot box system, but it is extremely generous. It never asks you for real money, but it probably did at some point. And they just, you know, the delay was to take that part of the equation out and just make it into something you didn't have to pay for. Another mistake was that open zone is an actual term beyond what I was describing in the video, and I was just being ignored. I can't even say the way I just said it because every time I go to try and repeat what I said, it comes out correctly. Ignorant. I don't know. Whatever the case was, I was an idiot. Open zone is meant to describe the kind of pseudo-open world that is both in Sonic Frontiers and even Super Mario Odyssey, where it's like this halfway point between being a level and being an open world, which technically means that, like, I guess all the levels in Super Mario 64 are probably considered open zone. That's still, like, parts of that is still kind of what I was talking about, kind of where I was going, but not exactly. So I'll own up to not really understanding because I probably, like, skimmed a headline where Takashi Iizuka was talking about open zones, like, 11 months ago, and I probably didn't even read it, to be honest, because it seemed silly to me at the time, and, like, you know, I could do better about that, certainly. I'm not gonna pretend that I'm, like, some kind of amazing genius or whatever. I was an idiot. This didn't actually come up, but one of my patrons pointed it out from the early access version of the video. I got a couple of the dates wrong. In the video, I list Sonic Generations as having come out in 2012, when it actually came out in 2011. I think I might have realized this at the time, but I didn't get the PC version until 2012, so in my mind, it's always just been a 2012 game. And then I also said that Sonic Frontiers didn't come out until 2023, and, you know, obviously it's a 2022 game, but again, you know, with the way everything played out with the Sonic Adventure 2 video, and, you know, me putting off finishing Sonic Frontiers for so long, it felt like a 2023 game to me, so that's what I wrote down. Again, that's just like the traffic jam of my life compounding on things. Some people have also pointed out that during the segment where I say that Sonic fans requesting shooting sections be added to Sonic games is what led to Shadow the Hedgehog, that's kinda sorta true, but not the entire truth. What actually happened Sonic fans, requesting shooting segments be added to Sonic games is what resulted in E102 Gamma in Sonic Adventure and the mech shooting segments in Sonic Adventure 2. Generally speaking, I more associate it with Shadow the Hedgehog, so that's just me, glossing over something to make a point that I already knew about. I just, I associate it with a different game than most people do. And like to be fully transparent here, I actually did do a Google search to absolutely make sure that, people were using that phrase to talk about Shadow the Hedgehog, and I didn't find any sources. Because, in my mind's eye, I was so sure that the shooting factoid was related to Shadow. And when I didn't find any sources, I just kind of shrugged and went, oh well, I think it's a funny bit. Maybe not so much in retrospect anymore. But that's humor for you. It's very subjective. Even to the person who made the joke. And the last correction, we're going through these real quick, is that when I'm complaining about how long it takes to execute a Cyloop to stun enemies that turtle your attacks, the game actually gives you tools to deal with this. One of the skills on Sonic's skill tree is actually an ability called a quick Cyloop, where, as one of Sonic's many combat moves, you just do a short, tight little loop around an enemy, and that's a quick Cyloop. I've left several comments about this, but I'll figure I'd address it in the video as well. But the problem there is that the quick Cyloop is attached to a meter. You can only use it twice before the meter is depleted, and after that, you must build the meter back up by doing more combat. So generally what happens with this quick Cyloop is that, the game will spawn 4, 5, 6 enemies all at once. You'll quick Cyloop 2 of them, and then spend, at least the whole rest of the fight, maybe even part of the next fight, waiting for your quick Cyloop to recharge. So you can't really use it. It's still really not that useful during combat. You still will eventually have to do the long, slow version of the Cyloop that I'm complaining about. And if you watch in the video, you can even see me do the quick Cyloop a couple of times. So, I definitely knew that was in there. It's not as useful as it should be. It needs a little bit more rebalancing. I think they figured that if you could just do a quick Cyloop on every enemy at any time, no matter what, then it would probably break the fight mechanics a little bit. I don't think it does at all, because, the way the combat system works in that game, there's another move you can unlock, and you see me do it a couple times in the video as well, where if you're doing a slide when you boost into an enemy, Sonic does like this big aerial loop around kick, and to me that breaks the combat system a little more than anything else, because it gives you like a big guaranteed opening strike that often does like a lot of damage. It's also just really fun to watch. I love doing the slide loop kick into enemies constantly. One of the favorite last minute additions I did to that video review was when I do it to Ninja on Kronos Island. Ninja is going through his big, Guardian intro or whatever, and I've already done like the loop kick into his face, and you just hear that like Hanna-Barbera noise. I added that. Like, that was one of the last things I put in the video before I rendered it, was that little bonk sound. Because I love it. He's trying to do this big cool looking intro, and I'm just like, nope, get kicked in the face. So that's it. That's everything. That's all I wanted to say. If you're watching this, if you watched the whole video to the end, thank you very much. But that's all I'd like to say. Again, thank you all for watching and coming out and enjoying my videos. I was real down on that Frontiers video those first couple days, because I knew people were going to have a negative reaction to some of the things I said, but there were people I didn't expect that acted like I hurt them, and that didn't make me feel very good. But things have been looking up in the days since then. I think it's finding a wider audience. But see you on the next one. I don't know when it'll be. I don't know if I want to do another really long video or try and figure out something shorter, faster, and easier. Stay tuned. He said, already forgetting about the Sonic Frontiers DLC video.